actually. And just to provide a quick synopsis on Health ID. Health ID is a coronavirus monitoring platform that also functions as a vaccine passport and really enhances and values data privacy and the privacy of the individual that is using the app. So Della is kind of going to go into a presentation about Health ID, what it is, what has been done with this amazing technology so far. And I think this is a technology that, there's a real value right now in the marketplace for a technology like this. And that's what Della is doing. He's first to market with this, and it's a very real need that people have. So I'm going to let him take it away with his presentation, and then we can get into Q&A afterwards as well.
Thank you very much, Upasna. Hi, everyone. Actually, just as I think about this, I'm just going to connect a slightly better microphone. Just give me one moment. Yeah, so we developed Health ID. Can you hear me okay? Yep. That's a positive. Okay, unless I hear otherwise, I will assume yes. Yeah, so we developed Health ID as a private, safe, and secure way for people to be able to share their health information, their COVID status, their COVID health status. We've been working on it for about a year, and we're about to launch it now, direct to consumer. We've been working mostly in the B2B space with it to date, working with some large enterprises in terms of trials and tests of it, and now we're launching it directly to consumers in the market. So I'll start with a short video, which gives a good overview of the project and the product. And then I'll dive a little bit more into a bit more detail around it. This is the first of a series of webinars that we will be holding on Health ID to explain how it works, what it does, how we're going to market with it, what projects and pilots we're working on with it. So today's focus is really going to be more around the product and really what it does and how it works. And in future webinars, we'll get into more detail around the business and the like. Okay, so without any further ado, let's dive in. Health ID is the first privacy-led and science-backed complete health monitoring service to help you and those around you get back to your life safely. Health ID uses world-leading technology to help you and your loved ones avoid catching, spreading, or becoming ill from the virus by letting you know who's sick and who's at risk of being sick right now in real time. Health ID also allows you to sell your information anonymously to researchers if you so wish, enabling you to earn money from your data every month. Most importantly, though, it secures your sensitive data with an advanced privacy platform, maximizing your safety. Health ID, you scan your oxygen saturation, respiration, and heart rates by simply looking into a phone's camera. This can help determine if you have coronavirus even before you show symptoms. It has a medical-grade symptom checker and lets you record test results verifiably. It contact traces accurately in real time, letting you know if you have been near anyone infected while keeping your identity safe and anonymous. Health ID lets you share your health state safely with family members, friends, colleagues, and healthcare workers, even if you become ill in ways that you control. Health ID is a complete monitoring tool and vaccine passport integrated into one single app with recommendations on what to do tailored to you and your family's health circumstances. Health ID gives us a powerful tool to come together as a community and protect those in need responsibly and safely in ways that build trust. Health ID, putting your health safely in your hands.
So that's a good sort of overview of Health ID. And now I'm going to walk you through the app itself and just show you how it works very quickly, just to sort of barnstorm through the functionality of it. So the first thing with Health ID is when you register and sign on, you're creating a self-sovereign identity. This means it's an identity framework that you own and control. After this, you then start to enter details about previous health conditions and states of health. And then you get to this process where you can scan your vitals. And this is one of the more interesting aspects of the app, where you're able to use the phone as a sensor to derive your oxygen saturation, heart rate, etc. You also answer questions about how you feel, and you can answer questions about what tests you might have taken and whether you have been vaccinated or not. You put details and dates around that, and we're able to pull this information from electronic health records in some cases, or you can upload them through through photographs of your credentials. As you can see here, the phone is scanning me, and it follows your face as you're doing that. When the scan is completed, you get your vitals and results, and most importantly, you get this credential that's green at the top, which you can see there. Which means that you're all clear. And again, depending on your vaccine status and other conditions and factors, that will be triggered automatically. There is a contact tracing framework which you can activate or deactivate anytime should you wish, which gives you 3 different types of risks in terms of proximity. Have you been near anyone? Density. Have you been close to lots of people, etc. And this is the kind of core part of Health ID, this ability to have different data sets that you can share with different entities. We call these MPODs. And in this case here, you can see this is a particular set of information that you can share. In this case, this one is designed for an employer, but we have similar ones that are designed for public. If, for example, you're going to a football game or to a Starbucks and you need to present information that you're vaccinated, then you can do this in a privacy preserving way, in a way that you share the minimum information that is needed with each party accordingly. So let's just recap on the features of Health ID. It's really designed to be an end-to-end solution for COVID monitoring. So symptoms monitoring that's enabled by, or vitals monitoring, I should say, sorry, that's enabled by using the smartphone's camera. Symptoms monitoring that are medical grade, that put context around your vitals in terms of how you're feeling. You know, a reliable, attested record of your test results and vaccination results and times when you took those vaccinations and all the details around that. And this is obviously critical for gaining access to different places, but also in terms of scheduling booster shots and keeping a good record of your vaccines and boosters that you can share with health authorities as boosters become available, for example. Contact tracing is again dependent on where you are, but in terms of the level of exposure, if people around you have been have been exposed to COVID, then contact tracing allows that to be done, but in a very confidential and privacy preserving way. We use the best-in-class technologies around blockchain and anonymization to secure that. And then this smart credential system, and this allows you to basically get insights for your own safety in terms of whether you are at risk or whether you are likely to have been infected. Infectious is only as a result of a PCR test. So, but the at-risk capability gives you an indication of whether you need to go and get tested. And even if you have been vaccinated, this is still relevant because the vaccine isn't 100% effective. It's effective for 90+%, which is obviously great, but there are outliers and you don't know whether you're going to be one of those outliers or not. So it's still important to keep a tab on your level of exposure if you're feeling ill and get tested and be able to get the right advice in terms of what to do, the right directions accordingly. So you'll hear a lot from us, our focus on privacy, and basically the key proposition with Health ID is that information is anonymous by default. And that means that when you're sharing information, it cannot be used to identify you unless you opt to do that, like if, for example, you're sharing information with your doctor or a healthcare provider where you would want them to know who you are. But in general senses, in public sort of deployments, and even in professional deployments like at work for accessing premises and the like, this should all be done in a anonymized state by default. One other thing that's very important to note is that we've have a partnership and have a smart card system that enables Health ID to work both in a physical or digital context. So even people who don't have smartphones, obviously not a big problem here in the US, but in other parts of the world it is a big problem where not everyone necessarily has a smartphone. So it's possible for people to have the same protections, the same degree of certainty, and for this community to have the same degree of confidence that people are vaccinated or tested negatively accordingly, without necessarily needing the person to have a smartphone to be able to do that. And this ability to share specific data sets, again, we think is really key. And we are also looking at scenarios where we can reward people for sharing information about their health status, whether they're clear, whether they're vaccinated or not, what symptoms they're having, with various parties in an anonymized context. In terms of the team behind it, so we're really a combination of technology and healthcare professionals that are really passionate about health equity and privacy and privacy rights and patient-centric rights. And we're also guided by an esteemed advisory team of healthcare and privacy professionals that have stellar records in terms of their exposure and their legacy in the space. So Dr. Krishna, for example, is a leading physician at St. George's in the UK. Dr. Alex Kahana is Chief Medical Officer for a variety of different decentralized projects and initiatives, has worked with the UN, with the EU, and various other multinational bodies. Richard Marlink is the head of public health at Rutgers, and Patrice Webb and John Edge are very esteemed in the privacy space. John Edge particularly having been the founder of ID 2020, which works with various government agencies and NGOs like the World Health Organization and the UN on standards for identity management that protect citizens' rights around the world. So where we're at in the project now is, as I say, we've been focused on B2B deployments of the application for the last year, but now we're launching it direct to consumer, and we are launching a campaign on Indiegogo to introduce this consumer world, to run research and get feedback in terms of which features are working. The campaign will be launching on June 12th, but you can sign up currently by going to indiegogo.com and searching Health ID, and you can sign up now and join our program and get early access, so get sort of bumped up the waiting list in terms of being able to get access to the app and download it as and when we introduce it. So that's it on the presentation, and I can pause and take some questions. Over to you, Pasna. All right, there you go.
Great. It looks like everybody that has questions, can you please, maybe we can give everybody a minute or so to put their questions in the chat or the Q&A box. Okay, if not, well, I have a lot of questions up my sleeve, so I'm happy to, ask you those. Is there any competition in this space right now? Are there other COVID monitoring platforms and technologies that are coming up, and how does Health ID compare with those?
Great question. So yes, I think first thing is that there are many apps out there that address COVID in different aspects in different parts. And I think what you generally find is that they tend to fall into a couple of categories. So, and that also is based on the evolution of the pandemic. So in the early days of the pandemic, there was a lot of focus on symptoms questionnaire apps. And then there was a fair amount of contact tracing apps using digital contact tracing. And then effectively test certificates was sort of the early stages of the vaccine passes, and most of the passport orientated apps were focused on vaccination, which were early at that stage. So I think those are generally the directions, and there are a few different apps in each of those categories. But I think, so firstly, we're the only app that I'm aware of that is as comprehensive, that's end-to-end, complete end-to-end in that regards. And that's the first thing. And I think even in there are other couple of differentiators. So I think even we're one of the very few apps that I know of that also combines objective with subjective data. So we monitor how people feel through questionnaires and surveys, but also how they actually are through analyzing vitals. So having the ability to do that is very important. And then integrating that. And then we have a very advanced protocol in terms of being able to assess risk and target responses to people based on their particular circumstances. So using an algorithm and AI to effectively optimize that framework. And then I think a lot of apps out there claim privacy as a prerequisite. But generally speaking, I think that we're very differentiated on the privacy front in two directions. Firstly, so where we are with the vaccine, with the pandemic now, we're in the vaccine phase. And in fact, we're almost in the post-vaccine phase, although I think very few countries are really post-vaccine, like even here in the US, which has really come to the forefront of the vaccinated countries. Israel is probably the leading country in the world in terms of percentage of vaccinated population at about 60%. We're around 50 or less here at the moment. It's actually about 30 nationally, but about 50 within the adult population. And so you have a scenario where you've got half people vaccinated and half people who are not. I think that we are one of the only vaccine passport systems out there at the moment that is really citizen-centered, that is designed around the citizen rather than around the state or enterprise in that regards. And that really develops a proposition around how to protect the citizens' data in various contexts where they're sharing it. So I think that's probably our key differentiator compared to others.
Great, thanks so much. We have a few more questions in the chat. Petra Wilson is asking, which blockchains is Health ID on or planned to be on?
It's a great question, Petra. So Health ID is built on MetaMe's technology, our MPOD framework, our MPOD technology. Our MPOD technology creates these unique data containers that are used to share this information with third parties. And MPODs are, you can think of them almost like multidimensional NFTs. You know, NFTs are basically like certificates of ownership. An MPOD is like a crypto asset that actually gives you ownership of the information. Now, one of the key things that we, in the delivery of MPODs is that, as I've said to you, as I've said several times, you know, it's very important for us that all transactions are anonymous by default. And anonymity is really important to us in terms of preserving privacy. Now, in terms of blockchains that can deliver anonymity by default, it's a really big challenge for the industry. You know, a lot of people talk about identity in the blockchain space, and it's very easy. It's not extremely easy, but it's a lot easier to identify people. That's not the problem with identity. The problem with identity is not in being able to identify people. The problem is being able to keep people anonymous. Now, you can do that with things like Ethereum or even more advanced protocols like Cardano and the like, where we're using zero knowledge proof and those frameworks, but that's very heavy compute. So essentially, the solution for us around this has been to use a combination of legal frameworks and technical frameworks to guarantee anonymity. So that has basically led us to permissioned blockchains to enable this. So we focused on the leading permissioned blockchain at the moment, which is Hyperledger Fabric. That said, we have also done a architectural design framework to be able to deploy that across Ethereum's Besu. And as the technology evolves, our ambition is to move to a permissionless context, but we don't really believe the technology is advanced enough as yet to be able to guarantee anonymity by default for all transactions across the network. So in that sense, our backstop is to have contract law that mandates that parties that engage with us agree contractually as well as technologically to enforce anonymity and not to re-identify people. I know that was a long-winded answer, but I hope it answers your question.
No, that was great. And that was actually very descriptive and insightful. Petra also thanks you for being so precise. She just put that in the chat. Okay, so next we have Nicholas Nachboer. How does my vaccine info get inputted into the app when I get vaccinated in a drive-through, or when I got vaccinated in a drive-through?
That's a great question, Nick. So there are a few ways. So we're into this whole issue of attestation, right? How do you attest and prove that you have been vaccinated? And the reality is that the W3C, the World Wide Web Consortium, has developed a 3-leveled framework for attestation. So the lowest level is where there's no proof at all. It's just really you state this. Second level is where you state it and affirm it with some sort of documentation. Third level is where the attestation comes from connecting to a service where we attest it through technology, or where third party validates it effectively. And then fourth is where you add another layer of security above that. Very few people go to the fourth layer. We've designed Health ID to accommodate those 3 different levels of attestation. So in the simplest context, you can go through a drive-through, get your vaccine card and take a photograph of that and upload that into the system. We have got frameworks to use AI to observe, to review that data. And for example, we can match the information on your vaccination card with data that's open around vaccine deployments in that area, in your area, and at the time, batches of vaccines to get a degree of certainty around whether that is a true status or not. So that's the simplest way. But in certain states and based on different partnerships, we can also connect to databases like the CDC database or electronic health records. We have a partnership with a company that allows us to connect with electronic health records in certain states and pull that data directly from there. And we have another partnership with another company whereby at the point of receiving the vaccine, the clinician can enter that data into the system, and they will enter it into the system, which will then go into your app, and it will go into the local health record that you've been vaccinated as well. And then you have that as an attested record that you can carry through and use in third-party scenarios going forward. So it's very flexible, effectively, and we can grade the level of certainty that we have around the veracity, the reliability of that vaccine credential according to which of those methods has been used.
Awesome. That was a great answer. Thank you. Okay, we also have Robert Barris that says, Dele, curious, why did we go with a different platform for exposure than the original engine? More a curiosity. It is a great platform. I have used it before. Will there be a charge for the app?
I'm not sure I quite understand the first part of that question. So could you just read that again, please, Upasana?
Sure. He said, curious why we went with a different platform for exposure than the original engine. More of a curiosity. This is a great platform. I have used it before. And then he asks, will there be a charge for the app?
So I can answer the second part first,
Okay.
and maybe if you could clarify, Robert, what you mean in the first part of the question while I answer the second part, because I don't quite understand what you mean by a different platform for exposure versus notification. But on the second part, it's a great question. And without trying to get too philosophical about it, our ambition is to deliver the app to people for free. Although we're a little bit, we have mixed feelings about this, to be honest with you. I think on one hand, we know that there is no such thing as a free app really out there. The reality is that when you sign up to these apps and services for free, they're taking your data and monetizing it in some shape, form, or another, and exploiting you accordingly. This is the complete opposite of what we want to do with Health ID specifically and MetaMe generally, more holistically. So we are, what we aim to do is, in terms of, I think it's that's the essence of, if someone says to you that their app is for free, then you have to ask them, well, what's the business model behind it? And if it's being supported by a government agency or an NGO and they're funding it, then fine. But even then you have to dig deeper and really understand what are the mechanics really behind the use of your information with this app. So with Health ID, our model is that we don't want it necessarily to be a free app. Now, the net cost to the user could be free. In fact, even better than that, what we really want with Health ID is for people to actually be able to get value from the app. And we know that people's healthcare data is extremely valuable in the market. So our model is really to enable people to earn money from using our app, and to earn money by making their data available for research on one hand, but then with the assurance that our technology provides to give them the certainty that their data is not going to be used in ways that can harm them. You see, there's a theme here, right? And the way that you do that is by assuring anonymity of the data. That's why anonymity is so important to us, to be able to have a way to be able to ensure that, well, regardless of who you share this data with, unless you're sharing it with your doctor or with your family or friends where you've given permission for yourself to be identified, if you're exchanging it in other commercial contexts, that it can be done anonymously. But the upside of that is that that means that we can make this data available to research institutions, for them to pay people for access to that data. So one of the things we're really keen to figure out with this, our Indiegogo campaign, is will people make their data available to industry and to research organizations in exchange for financial rewards if we can give them the assurances. And what that would then mean is that by earning money from the app, we can offset any subscription fee for the app from that. So the net cost can be zero in that regards. But if you want, you can make money from it. And if you don't want to make your data available to anyone at all, then you can pay for the app effectively. So it's a kind of reverse freemium model.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Dele. Robert actually did clarify the first half of his question. He says Indiegogo versus the first one for Meta Knights. That was Start Engine. Without being specific, thinking too that a $1 flat charge would be a great idea to build onto the app from the budget.
A $1 flat charge.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Maybe Robert, you can clarify that part as well. And in the meantime, Dele, you can answer why Indiegogo versus Start Engine for Health.
Great question. So with Meta Knights, It's a different kind of project, and it's a different type of crowdfunding. It's basically, with the Start Engine campaign on Meta Knights, is basically selling equity in the company, in Metaye Media, which is one of our affiliates. With Indiegogo, one of the things that we really wanted to understand here, so the simple answer is that Indiegogo, we're using Indiegogo more as a product sales platform than a crowd, a crowdfunding, in the sense of funding the project to actually develop the initiative. With Meta Knights on Start Engine, we basically raise money from the community to develop the Meta Knights proposition. With Health ID, we're quite advanced in the product. The product is actually, we have a beta product that's in closed beta at the moment, and we're ready to release it to early adopters and early users. In the future, it's possible that we may do an equity crowdfund around Health ID as a proposition. But for the moment, we're really using Indiegogo as a sales platform to enable us to sell the product and put it in people's hands quickly. And most importantly, around this proposition, the thing we're very keen to understand through this is what percentage of people will want the app, will want to pay for the app and not share their data. What percentage of people will want to offset the subscription cost of the app by making their data available to researchers, and what percentage of the population will want to make money from their data using the app. So this is we're getting different insights from it, accordingly.
Awesome. Okay, so Robert Barris did follow up saying a flat one-time charge versus a monthly charge. So going back to his question, it says, without being specific, he was thinking that a flat $1 charge would be a great idea to build on the app as opposed to a monthly charge.
Absolutely right. And that is our plan. It would be a one-time charge. It will be a one-time flat charge for the app, but then an ongoing ability to basically use the app to earn rewards. And those could be financial rewards. There could be other kind of benefits that come as we build out an ecosystem of products and services around the app that could be both monetary and non-monetary. So lots of well-being services. So absolutely. I mean, there's a possibility it might call for an annual subscription or something, but that's not really our intention. Our intention is to have a one-time charge for the app, and then for the app to work for people in that regards, in terms of having this bilateral relationship between people and the ecosystem around them.
Awesome. Okay. And then it looks like we have a question from Holly as well that that says, how can I get paid from the app? So how can users get paid from using the app?
Yeah, so essentially what we will do is create, using this, our MPod technology, a data set that has information that we know is valuable to research companies, and effectively then make that data available for research in a confidential manner. So it's kind of called zero knowledge computing, not zero knowledge proof, but almost like the actual technology is multi-party compute. And the idea is simply that we enable people to share this data with third-party researchers. Those researchers agree by contract and by technology that they're not going to re-identify the people who share their data, and we prevent that from happening using cryptography and blockchain. And then effectively, that data is then paid for and you get paid. We basically, the way that we frame that is that actually the way we position that is that we enable industry and researchers to pay people for the data directly, and we just take a commission for enabling that to happen. The idea is that 80% of that revenue will come to the user, and then 20% of it will go to us as commission. Now, in the short term, we may need to just pay people ourselves, like a fee for making that data available, while we work with third parties and establish what the right prices are, or what researchers and industries are prepared to pay for that information.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you so much, Deli. We have one final question before we wrap. The question is from an anonymous attendee that is asking, can you tell us more about how you can securely share your data? So kind of a little bit of a repetition from previous questions, but you know, we can make this anonymous attendee happy by answering it again.
Friendly anonymous attendee, I like it. You know, it's all about anonymity. It's a great question, actually, and it is actually, there's a lot of complexity in this, but I'll make it really simple. So the essence of how you do this is, I'm going to give you a bit of an answer that is going to be annoying initially, but then I'll explain it and you'll see why. Well, the way to do it is actually by not sharing the data at all. That's how you kind of allow your data to be shared anonymously. So what essentially we do is first of all, we create these data packets that have got the smallest amount of data that's needed inside of them. But the data packet itself actually stays under your control. It stays in your wallet as a user. And then what you do is you provide keys to access that data to third parties. So what you're actually sharing is the key to access the data, not the data itself. So this means that this is meant by the idea of self-sovereign, meaning your data is always under your control. And therefore, all you're doing is giving someone, it's kind of like giving someone a window into your information. And it's a window into a very small room in a big house that's all your data. You're giving someone a window into a very small room that has a very specific data set. And at any time you no longer wish for that person to be able to access that data, it's like you can close the shutter, or you can close it so that it's no longer visible to that party. So that's essentially how we do it, by giving you a set of keys that you can give to third parties to see the data if you, under the conditions that you allow. And if you want to stop that at any point, or if there's any violation, it's cut off from there.
Fantastic. Well, hope that answered your question, anonymous attendee. Anyway, that is all. We're at 10:40, so we're you know, in a good place to wrap, unless I don't see any more questions in the chat. We will be hosting webinars for Health ID fairly frequently. We'll have another one coming up a few weeks from now, so you can save all your questions for that one. And thank you so much for joining and participating.
And thank you very much, Vipassana. Great job as always for doing such a wonderful task in moderating this. And yeah, it's been good fun, and looking forward to talking to everyone again very soon. Bye.
Bye.